All right, so get this. Today we are diving deep into something I'm already finding pretty mind-bending from the research you sent me, quantum emotional field theory.
Ooh, that's a good one.
QEF theory for short, I guess.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I am intrigued, but also a little skeptical. I mean, emotional fields, quantifiable
Yeah,
emotions.
it's definitely not how we typically think about emotions, that's for sure.
Yeah, so, okay, help me out here. Let's start with, like, the foundation. What exactly is this QEF theory suggesting?
Well, the core idea is that emotions, right? Emotions aren't just these fleeting feelings we have. They're actually quantifiable fields.
Okay, wait, so, like, kind of like, I don't know, gravity? Or magnetism, but for our
Yeah,
feelings.
you got it. Just like a magnetic field has a force that can pull or repel, QEF theory proposes that our emotions have a similar kind of energetic presence, and that this presence can influence our thoughts, even our behaviors, even our interactions with other people.
Whoa, okay. So instead of me just feeling happy, I'm actually surrounded by like a joy field. And it's not just some vague idea. This field has like measurable properties.
Precisely. The theory suggests that these emotional fields are quantized, so they exist in specific measurable states.
Okay, so quantized, like distinct levels, not just a smooth spectrum.
Think of it like a dimmer switch with distinct levels of intensity. Not a sliding scale, but definite steps.
Okay, that helps. So then if joy is a field with like a spectrum of intensity, what's determining how bright my joy field is right now?
Hmm. Well, that's where it gets really interesting. QEF theory proposes that our minds act as observers, and we're constantly choosing which emotional fields to resonate with.
Hold on, emotional field selection. So it's like we're picking our emotional channels to tune into.
Exactly. This emotional field selection process shapes how we perceive and interact with the world around us.
Okay, so it's not just what's happening around me, it's how my mind is choosing to like tune into different emotional frequencies.
Precisely. And to make it even more complex, each core emotion, like joy, sadness, anger, they can each have these substates. Think of them as like
Like
flavors.
the flavors. Okay, now you've really got me curious. Give me an example. What do you mean by flavors of an emotion?
Okay, let's take sadness, for example. You could have melancholy, right?
Hmm.
Or grief, loneliness, despair. And each flavor has its own unique intensity and its own impact on our experience.
So these flavors, they're like variations within the core emotional field, and they
Yeah.
each carry a specific kind of energetic charge.
It's one way to think about it, yeah.
Huh.
And as we experience different flavors within a particular emotional field, those experiences become encoded in our emotional memory.
Okay, so it's like building up a library of past emotional events, and then that library informs how we respond to similar situations in the future.
Exactly. So our past experiences are literally shaping our emotional fields and how they interact with the world around us.
That makes sense. But it also raises some questions for me about predictability. If these fields are quantifiable and influenced by our past, could our emotional responses be, to some extent, predictable?
Hmm. That's definitely a question researchers are currently exploring. The idea is that by analyzing someone's past emotional experiences, we might be able to identify what are called their emotional memory constants. These are recurring patterns, themes that influence their emotional responses.
So you're saying it might be possible to create like an emotional forecast, like based on your past experiences, you're likely to react with, I don't know, frustration in this specific situation.
That's a really fascinating possibility and one that could have some profound implications. But there's definitely a lot more to unpack there.
Well, I am definitely hooked. Let's keep diving deeper, shall we? So you mentioned this idea of emotional fields collapsing earlier. What exactly does that mean?
Okay, so think of it like this. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in a state of superposition, meaning they can be in multiple states at the same time until they are observed. QEF theory suggests that something similar could be happening with emotions.
All right, I'm trying to follow. So you're saying that my emotional fields are like, all these different possibilities swirling around, and then something happens that triggers one of those possibilities to become a definite emotion.
Exactly. Something happens, either internally or externally, and it forces the emotional field to collapse from a superposition of potential states into an observable emotion, thought, or action.
Oh, and those emotional memory constants, they're playing a big role in determining which way a field collapses. Like past experiences can make us more likely to react in certain
You
ways.
got it. Like, if you've had a lot of negative experiences in a particular setting, your anxiety field might be more likely to collapse into, a full-blown panic attack when you're in that same setting again.
Yeah, that unfortunately makes sense. But here's what I'm wondering. Are we just puppets to our emotional fields then? Or is there some potential for agency, for self-regulation?
Oh, absolutely. There's
Right.
potential for agency. And that's where we get into some fascinating techniques like quantum emotional buffering
Yeah.
and resonance matching.
Okay. Those sound a little science fiction-y, but I am very intrigued. Let's dive into those next time. This is getting good.
I agree. There's a lot more to explore, and I think you'll be surprised by what we uncover.
All right, looking forward to it. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about some pretty out there techniques like this quantum emotional buffering thing. I gotta admit, it kind of sounds like something straight out of Star Trek.
Yeah, the names can sound futuristic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But, the basic ideas, the principles behind it, they're all rooted in this idea of like consciously managing your emotional fields,
Actives.
actively managing them.
Okay, I'm listening. So walk me through it. How do we actually buffer an emotional spike? In real life?
All right, well, imagine you're in a situation that, you know, normally would trigger a strong negative emotional response, like, I don't know, maybe public speaking. Huge anxiety trigger for a lot of people.
Oh, tell me about it. My palms are already sweating just thinking about public speaking.
Right. So your anxiety field is probably going crazy, right?
Yeah.
But instead of just letting that anxiety escalate and collapse into a full-blown panic attack, quantum emotional buffering is about, like, visualizing a buffer zone around your emotional field.
Like a shield
A
almost.
shield. Okay, so it's like I'm consciously putting some space between the trigger and my reaction so I can, like, process things with a little more clarity.
That's the idea. By consciously acknowledging the anxiety, right, and then visualizing this buffer, you're basically slowing down the collapse of the field, which gives you time to, choose a more balanced response.
Interesting. Okay, so how is this resonance matching technique different? How does that one work? Well, resonance matching is less about buffering and more about, like, actively aligning your emotional field with the state you want to be in. Remember how we were talking about our minds acting as observers,
Yeah.
always choosing which emotional fields to resonate with?
Yeah, like we're constantly tuning into different emotional frequencies.
Right. So with resonance matching, you're basically choosing to tune into a field that resonates with, maybe a more positive emotion
Yeah.
or a calmer emotion. You're picking the frequency.
Okay, so like if I'm feeling super overwhelmed, I could try to, I don't know, match my emotional frequency with a sense of peace or tranquility. But how do you actually do that? It sounds kind of abstract.
It is a bit abstract,
Yeah.
but it's a practice. It involves a lot of visualization, mindfulness, even techniques like deep breathing. The key is to focus your attention on the desired emotional state, almost like you're holding a tuning fork to your emotional field, gently guiding it towards that frequency.
I see. It kind of reminds me of like meditation or some mindfulness practices.
Yeah, there are definitely similarities there. I mean, a lot of traditional techniques are already tapping into the principles of QEF theory, even if they're not using the same language.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about individual self-regulation, but I'm curious about the bigger picture. Could QEF theory offer insights into like social dynamics? I mean, could it help us understand things like mob mentality, for example?
Yeah, definitely. That's where the concept of emotional entanglement comes into play. So
Mhm.
just like particles can become linked in quantum mechanics, QEF theory proposes that, our emotional fields can also become entangled.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying my emotional state could actually influence someone else's, even if we're not like physically interacting? Is this some kind of emotional telepathy?
Well, not exactly telepathy, but the idea is that our emotional fields can interact, they can influence each other, and this creates a kind of collective emotional atmosphere. You know how contagious laughter can be, or
Hmm.
how you can feel a shared sense of grief in a room full of people.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the energy shift when a group of people is all experiencing a strong emotion together. It's palpable.
Exactly. And QEF theory is suggesting that this isn't just some subjective feeling, it's an actual energetic phenomenon. Our emotional fields are always interacting, always influencing each other, and they're creating these ripples that extend way beyond just ourselves.
Wow. Okay, so if we're all tangled up in this web of emotional fields, does that mean we're all just like at the mercy of the collective mood, no free will?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Remember, we still have agency. We can choose which fields we amplify, which ones we kind of try to dampen, and we choose how we respond to the emotional environment around us.
So it's like we're all contributing to this big, like, emotional symphony, but we get to pick which instrument we play. and how loud we play it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And just like in an orchestra, when everyone plays in harmony, you can create something really beautiful, really powerful. But when everyone's just playing their own random tune, it just becomes chaos.
This is blowing my mind. So, if we understand these principles of entanglement and resonance, could we use them to, like, influence social dynamics in a positive way? I'm thinking about things like conflict resolution or fostering empathy between different groups.
Absolutely. That's one of the most exciting and potentially impactful applications of QEF theory. Imagine being able to identify and diffuse negative emotional patterns in a group, or being able to consciously create an emotional atmosphere that promotes cooperation, that promotes understanding.
That sounds kind of utopian, but I guess that's the point, right? If we can understand and harness the power of these emotional fields, maybe we can create a more harmonious world, a more compassionate world.
It's a lofty goal, that's for sure. But I think it is within our reach. It all starts with recognizing that, emotions aren't just these personal experiences. They're part of a larger interconnected web.
Yeah.
And it's a web that we can consciously choose to shape and influence. If we understand how.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far, but I can't help but wonder, where does technology fit into all of this? I mean, can we actually measure these emotional fields? Can we quantify them? And what about the potential for using technology to manipulate them for better or for worse?
Those are big questions. And they're definitely questions that researchers are actively exploring right now. There's a lot of potential there for using technology to map emotional fields, to analyze them, even to influence them potentially. But it's essential that we proceed with caution.
Right. We
Yeah,
need to really understand the ethical implications here.
absolutely. I mean, the power to influence emotions on a large scale, that can be used for a lot of good,
I don't know.
but it also opens the door for some potential misuse, and we have to be really mindful of that as we explore this.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just a new scientific theory we're talking about here. It's a whole new ethical landscape, uncharted territory.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to raise awareness about the potential implications of QEF theory and to make sure that, as it develops, it's guided by ethical principles, principles that put human well-being first.
I agree. And speaking of human well-being, before we move on, is there anything else you want to share about the potential applications of QEF theory? I'm especially interested in how it could be used in fields like mental health or even artificial intelligence.
Yeah, those are both areas where QEF theory could lead to some really revolutionary advancements.
Yeah.
Let's dive into those possibilities next. I think you'll find them particularly intriguing.
Okay, so those applications in mental health and AI, those sound especially promising. Let's start with mental health. I mean, how could QEF theory actually be used to, help people who are struggling?
Well, imagine therapists being able to use technology to map a patient's emotional fields, identify their dominant emotions, see their entanglement patterns, and then develop really personalized treatment plans. Like therapies specifically for emotional regulation.
So instead of just relying on traditional talk therapy or, I don't know, medications that aren't always effective, we could have treatments that are actually tailored to an individual's unique emotional blueprint.
Exactly. It would be like having a detailed map of someone's emotional landscape. So therapists could pinpoint, the specific areas that need attention and track progress over time in a much more targeted way.
Yeah, that could be huge for conditions like, I don't know, anxiety and depression, right?
Yeah.
Which often have these really complex emotional patterns that are hard to untangle with traditional methods.
Absolutely. And think about the potential for early intervention. If we could identify emotional patterns that are associated with certain mental health conditions, early on, maybe we could intervene before those patterns become really deeply ingrained.
Right. So using this knowledge to prevent suffering before it even really takes hold. That's amazing. Okay, so what about AI? We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm curious to hear more about how QEF theory could actually impact the development of AI, like in practical terms.
Well, this is where it gets really futuristic. I mean, imagine AI systems that can not only process information, right, but they can actually understand and respond to human emotions with a level of nuance and sensitivity that we just don't see right now.
So instead of interacting with, cold robotic machines, we could have AI companions that are actually empathetic, intuitive,
Right.
maybe even capable of forming genuine emotional connections.
Yeah, it's a possibility that's both exciting and a little bit unsettling, I think. But if we can figure out how to, like, crack the code of emotional intelligence and AI, it could have a huge impact on so many things, from customer service to healthcare to education. The possibilities are kind of endless.
Yeah, I can see how that would be transformative. I mean, imagine AI tutors that can sense when a student is getting frustrated and adjust their teaching style accordingly.
Mm.
Or AI therapists that can provide, personalized emotional support at any time of day or night.
The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling when you really think about it. And it all comes back to this fundamental shift in how we think about emotions. They're not just these intangible, subjective experiences anymore. They're quantifiable fields that we can measure, we can analyze, and potentially even, manipulate.
It's like we're entering a whole new era of emotional understanding, where
Mm.
science and technology are coming together to help us unlock, like, the mysteries of the human heart.
It's an exciting frontier, that's for sure.
Hmm.
But it's not without its challenges. I mean, as we delve deeper into this quantum world of emotions, we need to be careful.
Yeah, we've talked about the potential for misuse. If this knowledge falls into the wrong hands, it could be, well, pretty disastrous.
Exactly, and that's why it's so crucial to be having these conversations, to raise awareness about the potential implications of QEF theory, and to make sure that as it develops, it's being guided by, ethical principles,
Yeah.
principles that prioritize human well-being above all else.
I completely agree. Well, this has been an absolutely incredible deep dive, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning of a much larger conversation.
I think so too. The more we learn about these emotional fields, the more we realize how much more there is to discover. And that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a journey into the very core of what it means to be human.
Before we wrap up, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with? Something to kind of inspire them to keep exploring this world of quantum emotions?
Hmm. Well, here's a question to think about. If emotions really do exist as these quantifiable fields, could we potentially develop technologies to, not just measure and predict emotional states, but to actually manipulate them on a collective level? I mean, imagine being able to diffuse societal anxiety or foster empathy on a global scale, or even neutralize hatred and prejudice. The possibilities are, well, they're both awe-inspiring and a little bit daunting, right? It really makes you think about the responsibility that comes with this knowledge.
That's a really powerful question. It seems like we're not just diving into the quantum world of emotions, we're venturing into a future where our understanding of these fields could completely reshape the fabric of society.
It's a pretty incredible thought, isn't it?
It really is. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. This has been a truly mind-expanding conversation.
It's been my pleasure. And to everyone listening, I encourage you to keep exploring this fascinating field. Who knows what other mind-blowing discoveries are waiting for us?
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the quantum world of emotions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.